By the end of the second week, Sarah had stopped sleeping properly. She would lie in bed each night, watching the minutes tick by on her phone, waiting for 1:33 to arrive. The anticipation was almost worse than the ringing itself. Her coworkers had started noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way she would zone out during meetings. Her boss pulled her aside and asked if everything was okay at home, using that careful tone people use when they're trying to be supportive but really just want to make sure you're not going to become a problem. Sarah said she was fine, just adjusting to the new place. But she wasn't fine. She'd tried calling the police on the fourth night. The dispatcher had taken her information with barely concealed disinterest. Someone playing with your doorbell wasn't exactly a priority in a city with actual crimes happening. They said they'd send a patrol car by when one was available. No one ever came. On her 14th night in the apartment, Sarah went to a hardware store and bought a video doorbell. One of those smart ones that connected to your phone and recorded everything. The installation was simple, and by that evening, she had it mounted and activated. She felt a small surge of victory. Finally, she'd have proof. She'd see who or what was ringing her doorbell. And if it really was some kind of electrical malfunction, at least she'd know. That night, Sarah lay in bed with her phone on her chest, the doorbell app open and ready. At 1:33, the ringing started. Sarah immediately looked at her phone. The app showed the live feed from the camera. The hallway was empty, but the motion sensor wasn't triggered. The video showed absolutely nothing. No movement, no person, just the static image of an empty corridor bathed in yellow light. And yet, she could hear the doorbell ringing, feel it vibrating through the walls. She watched the feed for the full 6 minutes of ringing. Nothing changed. The hallway remained empty. The timestamp in the corner of the video ticked forward. 1:33, 1:34, 1:35. When the ringing stopped, Sarah backed up the recording and watched it again. And again. And again. There was nothing there. Except, Sarah paused the video and leaned closer to her phone screen. There, in the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was that movement? A shadow crossing at the edge of the camera's field of vision? She rewound and watched that section in slow motion. For just a fraction of a second, something dark moved at the periphery of the shot. Too quick to make out clearly. Too deliberate to be a trick of the light. Sarah felt cold spread through her chest. The next morning, she went back to Gloria's office. "I need to know something," Sarah said, not bothering with pleasantries. "How many people lived in apartment 304 before me?" Gloria looked up from her computer, her expression hardening. "That's not really relevant to." "How many?" Sarah repeated. Gloria sighed. "A few. People move. It happens." "How many people?" There was a long silence. Finally, Gloria said, 5. In the last 3 years. 5 people in 3 years? Sarah felt her stomach tighten. That's not normal turnover. Some people don't like the apartment, the layout, the noise, whatever. Where did they go? I don't keep track of where tenants move after they leave. Did any of them break their lease? Gloria's jaw tensed. All of them. Sarah felt the room tilt slightly. All 5 people broke their lease? Look, Gloria said, her voice lowering. I don't know what you're experiencing. I don't know what you think is happening. But my advice? Find another place. Break your lease. I won't fight it. I'll even waive the fees. You're telling me to move out? I'm telling you that some apartments have problems that maintenance can't fix. Sarah left the office feeling like she'd stepped into ice water. She spent the rest of the day at the library, using their public computers to search for information about her building. What she found made her blood run cold. She started with general searches. The building's history, any news articles or public records. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the standard information. Built in 1967, 12 floors, 48 units. But then she found a thread on a local forum. A discussion about strange apartments in the city. Someone had posted about a building on Maple Street, her building, specifically mentioning apartment 304. The post was from 2 years ago. A man named Marcus Chun had written about his experience living there. The nightly doorbell rings at exactly 1:33. The empty hallway, the feeling of being watched through the peephole even though no one was ever there. Marcus had lived in the apartment for 6 weeks before moving out. His final post on the thread was simple: "I'm leaving tonight. I don't care about the lease. I don't care about the deposit. Something is wrong with that apartment and I'm not staying to find out what." He never posted again. Sarah found 3 more similar accounts. Different people, different years, all from apartment 304, all describing the same thing: the doorbell, the pattern, the fear. And all of them had disappeared from the forums shortly after their last posts. Sarah tried searching for the names: Marcus Chin, Jennifer Holbrook, David Reese, every person who'd lived in her apartment before her. She couldn't find any of them. No social media profiles. No public records she could access. Nothing. It was as if they'd vanished completely after leaving the apartment. Just before the library closed, Sarah found one more thing. A news article from 15 years ago. Brief. Just a few paragraphs on page 8 of the local paper. Woman found dead in apartment. Police investigating. The article was sparse on details. A 34-year-old woman named Elena Vasquez had been found dead in her apartment. No signs of forced entry. No obvious cause of death. The investigation was ongoing. The apartment number was listed: 304. The time of death was estimated at 1:33 in the morning. That night, Sarah didn't go to bed. She sat on her couch with every light in the apartment turned on, watching the minutes tick by on her phone. When 1:33 arrived, the doorbell rang. 3 short bursts. Pause. 3 more. But this time Sarah heard something else. Something underneath the electronic chime. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Moving from left to right past her door. Sarah held her breath, listening. The doorbell continued ringing, but the footsteps were distinct. She could hear them clearly. The soft sound of someone walking on carpet. She pulled up the doorbell camera app on her phone. The hallway was empty, but she could still hear the footsteps. They reached the end of the hallway, then turned around, coming back toward her door. The doorbell rang. The footsteps walked past. No one was there. Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes. Not from sadness. From pure, overwhelming fear. The kind that makes you want to run but your body won't move. The kind that makes you understand why animals freeze when they're being hunted. The ringing stopped abruptly at 1:39. The footsteps continued for another minute. Then they stopped too. Sarah sat in the silence, shaking, staring at the empty hallway on her phone screen. And then, very softly, she heard something new. A voice, just on the other side of her door. So quiet she almost thought she'd imagined it. Whispering her name. Sarah. She dropped her phone. What do you think is happening to Sarah? Is this supernatural or something else? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain in your own home? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sarah didn't leave her apartment for 3 days. She called in sick to work. She had groceries delivered. She kept every light on, even during the day, and she avoided looking at the door, especially the peephole, because every time she walked past it, she felt certain that if she looked through it, something would be looking back. Her friends called. Her mother called. Sarah let everything go to voicemail. How could she explain? What could she possibly say that wouldn't make her sound like she was having a breakdown? Maybe she was. At night, she would lie on her couch with her eyes open, watching the clock on her phone, watching 1:33 approach with the inevitability of a train coming down the tracks. And every night it happened. The doorbell, the footsteps, the voice, always the same, always her name, whispered so softly she could almost convince herself she hadn't heard it at all. Almost. The next morning, Sarah went downstairs to the building manager's office. The superintendent was a woman in her late 50s named Gloria, with reading glasses on a chain and the permanent expression of someone who had heard every complaint a tenant could possibly have. Sarah explained what happened. The doorbell ringing at 1:33 in the morning. No one being there. The way it just kept going. Gloria's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A flicker of recognition. Or maybe resignation. Old building, Gloria said, not looking up from her paperwork. Electrical systems can be finicky. I'll make a note to have maintenance check it out. It wasn't an electrical problem, Sarah said. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Gloria finally looked up. Maybe a neighbor's kid playing a prank. You know how kids are. At 1:30 in the morning? I'll make a note, Gloria repeated, and her tone made it clear the conversation was over. Sarah left the office feeling more unsettled than when she'd arrived. There had been something in Gloria's reaction. Not surprise, not confusion, something closer to confirmation, like she'd been expecting this. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to settle into her new routine. She started her new job at the marketing firm downtown. She learned the bus routes. She bought groceries and learned which bodega on the corner had the best coffee. And every night at exactly 1:33 in the morning, her doorbell rang. Always the same pattern. 3 short bursts, a pause, 3 more. Always when she looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. Always the ringing lasted for 5 or 6 minutes before stopping abruptly. Sarah stopped looking through the peephole after the 3rd night. There was something worse about watching an empty hallway while the doorbell rang. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Some primitive part of her brain screaming that the absence of an explanation was more terrifying than any explanation could be. She tried wearing earplugs. The ringing cut through them. She tried turning on music loud enough to drown it out. She could still hear it underneath, insistent, patient. She tried sleeping on her couch, as far from the door as possible. It didn't matter. The sound found her. On the 6th night, Sarah encountered her neighbor in the hallway. An older woman from apartment 308, carrying a bag of trash toward the chute. They'd passed each other a few times but never spoken. "Excuse me," Sarah said, keeping her voice friendly. "I'm Sarah, from 304. I just moved in." The woman stopped, looked at Sarah with an expression that was hard to read. Not unfriendly exactly, but cautious. "I know," she said. "I was wondering if you've noticed anything strange? At night, around 1:30 in the morning." The woman's grip tightened on her trash bag. "I mind my business," she said. "I suggest you do the same. It's just my doorbell keeps ringing, and—" "Stop trying to find out," the woman interrupted, her voice sharp. "Stop asking questions. Stop looking through that peephole. And whatever you do, don't open that door." Before Sarah could respond, the woman turned and walked quickly down the hallway, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Sarah stood there alone, her heart pounding, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That night, at 1:33, the doorbell rang, and for the first time since moving in, Sarah felt something beyond confusion and annoyance. She felt afraid. Some sounds become part of the background noise of our lives. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old pipes, the distant traffic outside our windows. We learn to ignore them. We train ourselves to sleep through them. But there are some sounds that cut through everything. Sounds that wake you from the deepest sleep and fill your chest with immediate primal dread. For Sarah Mitchell, that sound was her doorbell. Not because of what it sounded like, but because of when it rang. And because of what happened to everyone who tried to find out who was on the other side. This is a story about the things that visit us in the night. The things that wait patiently on the other side of locked doors. And the terrible mistake of believing that a door can actually keep something out when it's already decided to come in. If stories like this make you question every sound you hear in the darkness, if you want more tales that will stay with you long after the lights go out, subscribe to this channel. Because trust me, you're going to need someone to talk to after this one. Sarah moved into apartment 304 on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. The building was old, one of those structures from the 1960s with narrow hallways that smelled like decades of cooking and cleaning products. The kind of place where the elevator groaned with arthritis and the walls were just thin enough to hear your neighbors' lives bleeding through. But it was affordable. And after her divorce, affordable was all that mattered. The apartment itself was small. A bedroom barely large enough for her bed. A kitchen with appliances that looked like they hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. but it had hardwood floors and the windows faced east, which meant morning light. Sarah told herself that was enough, that she could make it work. She spent that first day unpacking boxes, arranging her few pieces of furniture, trying to make the space feel like something other than the place where her old life had ended and her new one hadn't quite begun. By 11 that night, she was exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that makes your bones ache. She brushed her teeth, set an alarm on her phone, and climbed into bed without even bothering to hang the curtains. Sleep came quickly, and then, at exactly 1:33 in the morning, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a gentle ring. It was insistent. 3 short bursts, a pause, then 3 more. Sarah jerked awake, her heart already pounding before her mind had fully processed what had pulled her from sleep. She lay there in the darkness, listening, waiting for it to ring again. It did. 3 short rings. Pause. 3 more. Sarah pushed herself out of bed and walked slowly toward the front door, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. The apartment was dark except for the thin strip of light coming from under the door, the hallway fluorescence that never turned off. She approached the door carefully, suddenly aware of how alone she was, how quiet the building was at this hour. She leaned forward and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Nothing but that sickly yellow light and the faded burgundy carpet that probably hadn't been replaced since the building was new. The doorbell rang again. 3 times. Pause. 3 more. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She was looking through the peephole. She could see the doorbell button, and there was no one there, no one pressing it. But it was ringing. She stood frozen, her eye pressed against the small lens, watching the empty hallway as the doorbell continued its rhythm. 3 rings. Pause. 3 rings. It went on for 5 full minutes. Maybe longer. Sarah lost track of time, standing there in her pajamas in the dark, watching nothing happening while her doorbell rang and rang and rang. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the ringing. Sarah stayed at the door for another 10 minutes, watching, waiting for movement, for any explanation. Nothing came. She went back to bed but didn't sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around her, waiting for the doorbell to start again. Didn't. Not that night. But she knew, with a certainty that lived somewhere below rational thought, that it would. On the 4th day, Sarah forced herself to leave. Not because she felt brave. Because she was running out of food and she couldn't stand the thought of another delivery person ringing her doorbell during the day, triggering the same sound that tormented her at night. She went to the corner store at noon, when the sun was high and the streets were full of people. Normal people. People who weren't haunted by their own front doors. When she got back to her building, she found the woman from apartment 308 checking her mailbox in the lobby. The same woman who'd told her to stop asking questions. Their eyes met. The woman's expression softened slightly, just for a moment, like she was seeing something in Sarah's face that she recognized. "You look tired," the woman said. "I am tired." Sarah's voice came out rougher than she intended. "I'm tired of not sleeping. I'm tired of being afraid in my own home. And I'm tired of everyone in this building acting like they don't know what's happening." The woman glanced around the empty lobby, then stepped closer. "My name is Margaret," she said quietly. "I've lived here for 19 years, and I've watched 5 people move into 304 during the last 3 years. You want to know what happened to them?" "Yes. They all did the same thing you're doing. They asked questions. They tried to figure it out. They installed cameras and called the police and researched the building's history." Margaret's voice dropped even lower. "And then, one night, they decided to open the door when the doorbell rang. Every single one of them. They all eventually convinced themselves they needed to know what was on the other side." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "What happened when they opened it?" "I don't know. None of them would talk about it afterward. But they all left within 24 hours. Packed up their things in the middle of the night and disappeared. No forwarding address. No phone calls. Nothing." Margaret's eyes were intense. Whatever they saw, it was bad enough to make them run. Bad enough to make them leave everything behind. "Did you know Elena Vasquez?" Sarah asked. Margaret's face went pale. "Where did you hear that name?" I found an article. She died in my apartment 15 years ago. At 1:33 in the morning. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Elena was my friend. We used to have coffee together every Sunday. She was a good person. Kind. Smart. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. The week before she died, she told me something was visiting her apartment at night. Something that rang her doorbell. She thought it was a stalker. She thought it was someone from her past. She installed new locks. She called the police. She did everything right. What happened? The night she died, I heard her doorbell ringing through the walls. It went on for longer than usual, maybe 20 minutes. And then I heard her door open. Margaret's voice cracked. I heard her scream, just once. And then nothing. When the police came the next morning, they found her just inside the apartment. The door was wide open. And her face. Margaret stopped, unable to continue. What about her face? She looked terrified. The medical examiner said it was a heart attack brought on by extreme stress. But I saw her body when they wheeled her out. That wasn't just fear, Sarah. That was someone who saw something so terrible their heart couldn't take it. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. So what do I do? You move out. Tonight. Right now. You pack a bag and you leave and you never come back. And if I don't? Margaret looked at her with something like pity. Then eventually you're going to open that door. Because the not knowing will become worse than any answer could be. That's what it does. It waits. Is patient. And eventually, everyone breaks. Sarah went back to her apartment feeling like she was walking through water. Everything felt surreal. Distant. She started packing. Not systematically. Just throwing things in bags. Clothes. Toiletries. Her laptop. The essentials. She would leave. Margaret was right. She would get out tonight, find a hotel, deal with the lease and the lost deposit later. Nothing mattered except getting away from this apartment. She was in the bedroom, filling a duffel bag, when she heard something from the living room. The doorbell was ringing. Sarah froze. She looked at her phone. 3:47 in the afternoon. It wasn't time. It was never during the day. The ringing continued. 3 short bursts. Pause. 3 more. Sarah walked slowly to the bedroom door and looked out into the living room. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. Everything looked normal. Safe. The doorbell rang again. Sarah approached the front door. She knew she shouldn't. She knew exactly what Margaret had warned her about. But something was different about this. The time. The wrongness of it happening now in the light. She looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Asian. Mid-30s. Wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He looked normal. Completely ordinary. He raised his hand and rang the doorbell again. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Sarah felt relief flood through her. It was just a person. A real person. She reached for the door handle. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Don't open it. That's not a person. Margaret. Sarah's hand froze on the handle. She looked through the peephole again. The man in the hallway smiled directly at the peephole. Like he knew she was watching. His smile was too wide. His eyes were too dark. And he rang the doorbell again. The same pattern. 3 and 3. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart hammering. She grabbed her phone and pulled up her doorbell camera app. The hallway was empty. She looked through the peephole again. The man was still there, still smiling. Camera. Empty hallway. Peephole. Man standing directly outside her door. Sarah ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, and pushed her dresser against it. She was shaking so hard she could barely hold her phone. The doorbell kept ringing. 3 and 3. 3 and 3. It went on for 2 hours. When it finally stopped, Sarah waited another hour before moving the dresser and opening the bedroom door. The apartment was silent. The late afternoon sun was beginning to fade. Sarah walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. She checked her doorbell camera. Nothing unusual in the recorded footage. Just an empty hallway. But Sarah knew what she'd seen. She knew the difference between a hallucination and reality. That night, she didn't even try to sleep. She sat on her couch with her packed bags next to her, planning to leave at first light. At 1:33, the doorbell rang, and this time, when the voice whispered her name, it was louder, clearer. "Sarah, I know you're listening. I know you can hear me." The voice paused. "You've been researching. You've been asking questions. You found out about Elena, about Marcus and Jennifer and David and all the others." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "They all wanted to know what I was. They all thought they could understand. They were wrong." The doorbell rang 3 times. "But you're different, Sarah. You're more curious than the others. More persistent. That's good. That's what I need." 3 more rings. "Tomorrow night, at 1:33, I'm going to ring your doorbell, and you're going to open the door, because by then you'll need to. You'll need to know more than you need to be safe." The voice went quiet. The doorbell stopped ringing, and Sarah sat in the silence, knowing with absolute certainty that it was telling the truth. Sarah spent the next day in a strange state of numb detachment. She knew she should leave. She knew she should pack her things, walk out the door, and never look back. But she didn't. Instead, she spent hours online, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. She found more posts on obscure forums, more stories from people who'd experienced similar hauntings. She found references to entities that attached themselves to specific locations, to phenomena that fed on fear and curiosity, to doors that acted as thresholds between worlds. But nothing explained the why. At some point during the afternoon, Sarah realized she'd made a decision without consciously making it. She was going to stay. She was going to wait for 1:33. And when the doorbell rang, she was going to open the door. Not because she was brave, but because the not knowing had become worse than any answer could be. She spent the evening preparing. She charged her phone fully. She left lights on in every room. She unlocked the door so she wouldn't have to fumble with it in the moment. And then she sat on her couch and waited. The minutes crawled by. 11 o'clock. Midnight. 1 o'clock. At 1:30, Sarah stood up. She walked to the front door and stood there, her hand resting on the handle. Her phone showed 1:31, 1:32, 1:33. The doorbell rang. 3 short bursts. Pause. 3 more. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Sarah stepped out into the corridor, looking both ways. Nothing. No one. But the air felt different. Thicker. Colder. Behind her, she heard the door to her apartment close. Not slam. Just quietly click shut. Sarah turned. Her front door was closed. She tried the handle. Locked. The doorbell rang again. But this time it was coming from inside her apartment. Doors began opening along the corridor. Slowly, one by one. Sarah watched in horror as dark interiors were revealed. Figures emerged. Too tall. Too thin. Almost human. They stood in the doorways, all of them facing Sarah. She recognized the man from the peephole. His mouth wasn't smiling. It was open, impossibly wide. All of them were the same. And then she heard a voice behind her. "You wanted to know what I was." Standing at the end of the hallway was Elena Vasquez. "The doorbell isn't calling something in," Elena said. "It's calling something out. Every time it rings, a door opens inside you. This place is thin, and 304 is the thinnest spot. They are everyone who opened the door. How do I stop this?" "You can't. You already did." The figures closed in. Elena faded. Sarah screamed and woke up on the floor of her apartment. Morning light, scratches on her hands. Her front door was open. On the wall, words carved into the paint. "It's inside now. It's inside me." It was her handwriting. That night, Sarah sat in a hotel room across town. At 1:33 a.m., 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Because the door she'd opened wasn't in apartment 304. It was inside her, and it would never close again. "Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Good night, and sleep well, if you can. Now I need to know what you think. Do you believe Sarah could have done something different? Do you think the door was real, or was it all in her mind? And most importantly, have you ever heard something at night that you couldn't explain? Something that made you choose between knowing and being safe? Share your theories in the comments. Some of the most disturbing interpretations of these stories come from you, the viewers. Your insights, your fears, your experiences add layers to these tales that I could never imagine alone. If you made it this far, if you survived Sarah's story and you want more narratives that will make you check your locks twice before going to bed, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because there are more stories waiting, more doors that should never be opened, more sounds that should never be answered. And before you go, do me a favor. Watch our last video, the one about the sound coming from the attic. Because after what you just heard, you're going to want to know what happened to the person who decided to investigate. Trust me, you won't believe what they found. Until next time, remember this. Not every sound needs an explanation. Not every door needs to be opened. And if your doorbell ever rings at 1:33 in the morning, maybe just stay in bed. Some questions are better left unanswered.